sir. I mean, it's hard to carve out time anytime, but an hour on Christmas Eve is generous of you.
No, it's gracious of you to allow me on your great show, and I appreciate it very much. Merry Christmas to you, too.
Well, David, I got to say, I just finished talking to Joby Warwick about his book on ISIS, and he took 2 years to write it. And you've taken, what, 25 years to write the Emmaus Code? Is that right?
Well, indirectly. But no, I took about 6 months to actually write it. But I had the idea. The idea hatched 25 years ago.
That's it. You tell in the introduction that you were frustrated originally by what Christians call the Old Testament, what Jews call the Jewish Scriptures, and you put them aside for a good quarter century before you turned back to them after the massive success of your bestseller, Jesus on Trial, and walk people through that process, because I think it came as a surprise not just to me, but to many millions of Americans who've seen you on Fox News for years, that you were a believer to begin with when Jesus on Trial came out, much less, I mean, you're a serious student of Scripture.
I try to be. 20 to 25 years ago, I became a Christian, kicking and screaming, and I wrote about my process of discovery in Jesus on Trial. But I came to Jesus largely through the Old Testament, and I was so excited about learning about the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament that I wanted to write a book about it 20, 25 years ago. I started, got through 2.5 chapters, submitted it to a Christian agent who said, you have no credentials, this is too highfalutin for a guy with no credentials, and you have no credentials to be highfalutin, so get out of my face. So I basically, so 25 years ago with, 2 columns a week for 17 years and 6 other books, and now having introduced myself into the Christian genre, I figured I'd have a better platform and have a little more credibility to begin anew. So I started the project anew. By the way, the project that I started 25 years ago, I did recognize the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament. I titled the book Roadmap to the Cross. So that indicates, and it was about the Old Testament. This one, of course, is EMMAUS Code, Finding Jesus in the Old Testament. It's all about the Christ-centeredness of the Old Testament and the unity of Scripture and the idea of redemption.
And let me begin by directing people, whether you're a believer or not, if you'll just Google Luke 24:27, Luke 24:27, you'll find a scripture, the NIV version of it is, and beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Now, David, you write that is the key verse to prompt you and to explain what you were about here. Now, expand on that for people. And remember, we have Steelers fans in the audience. They go slow.
Yeah. Well, as you say, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, Christ encounters 2 of his disciples walking along the road to Emmaus. And Emmaus is about 7 miles from Jerusalem, according to the Scripture. They're walking along despondent and dejected. And because their Messiah their promised Messiah, Jesus, had just died, and he had not delivered and redeemed Israel from Rome, politically or militarily. Jesus appears out of nowhere supernaturally because he died 3 days before, and this is one of his resurrection appearances. And he asks them, what's wrong? And what are they talking about? And they say, are you the only person in Jerusalem that is not aware of what has occurred the last few days around here, meaning that Christ died in a humiliating death and without so much as a whimper of proving himself as a Messiah. And they were dejected. Their whole world was crumbling about them. And he said to them, basically, you of little faith, do you not realize that the Christ, and this is important, before the actual scripture where he opened it, the Christ had to suffer and go to his glory. Then he opened up the scriptures to them, meaning the Old Testament, because the New Testament had yet to be written, and showed how all of it pointed to him. The entire Old Testament pointed to him. They were made not to recognize him. They didn't recognize him, even though they lived with him. And then later they broke bread with him. They recognized him, and he left as quickly as he came. And they said, did our hearts not burn within us as he revealed the Scriptures to us? So you see, Hugh, they got the best Bible lesson ever given in the history of the world by the Son of God himself, who showed them that the Old Testament is all about him. And so I get these emails from Catholics, Lutherans, various other Mormons, various other people who say, yeah, it's fine, Limbaugh, that you come up with this, but this isn't your idea. The Catholic Church has been talking about this for hundreds of years. And I say, I celebrate you guys, but it's not the church that came up with it. Jesus Christ came up with it. He's the one who said it. So if I'm plagiarizing anyone, I'm plagiarizing Jesus.
Well, you're not plagiarizing anyone. You are, though, making accessible that which has fallen, I think, into a little bit of scholarly crevice. And my friend Dr. Wayne Grudem, whom I'm sure you know as well, is one for bringing all that is usually for the high scholars and making it accessible to the public. So your great triumph is in doing that. And I want to compliment you for going to Holman Bible Dictionary and getting the permission to reproduce the first appendix, because here is, you know, you just mentioned it's 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and I usually do 6-7 miles on 2 hours. And so that is, you know, maybe add a little bit on at the end because they're breaking bread. These are the verses which Christ would have been discussing with his companions, right? And it would take a couple of hours to walk through, whether it's the dozen references in Genesis and Exodus, all the way through to the Isaiah references, which are plentiful, all the way through. As you said, he's in every book. That's how you put Melchizedek, whatever. That makes sense then, doesn't it? It's about a 2-hour talk.
Yes, and I can't imagine what a glorious experience that must have been. People have asked me, if you had a time machine, you'd like to go back to one place and meet one person, one event, what would it be? And that would probably be it. Because I would love to hear Jesus unfolding the Scriptures, revealing himself to those people. And this stuff, but most of which is accepted by Bible scholars, at least conservative Bible scholars.
And after the break, we'll come back and walk through some of them as examples for you. But David Limbaugh, who is the author of the Emmaus Code, it's linked at HUGHHEWITT.com, at the Mormon Temple in San Diego, where they do a Christmas tree lighting ceremony, and they ask a non-Mormon always to talk. And without arranging, the choir that was singing after I gave a little talk sang this song, so I always like to play it at this time. And do you know what I know? And that fits with the Emmaus Code, David Limbaugh's brand new book, because there's a lot that you should know that you may not know. And I want to go right to page 280, David, to Isaiah, because this is the season of Advent, and anyone who is going to church is hearing Isaiah read right now. And Isaiah writes 739 to 680 BC, sometime in there. This book is written is when he is ministering to the people of Israel. And these are most of the prophecies that people hear this time of the year, but they're the lockdowns, in my view, David Limbaugh. They're the ones that sealed the deal for your thesis.
Yes. I mean, if you read Isaiah 53 and then you read that in conjunction with, for example, Psalms 22, you get a very detailed, specific picture of Christ's life, death, and resurrection. Some stunning prophecies that were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. In fact, some people have become Christians reading Isaiah 53 alone. And that's the Old Testament. That needs to be underscored.
You write on page 286, Christ permeates the book of Isaiah. The book's voluminous messianic prophecies are more explicit than those of any other Old Testament books. And then you go through and you list them. I'm not going to read them right now. People, what are there, 50? Are there 100?
Yeah, I haven't counted them. It's pretty scary. There's hundreds of messianic prophecies, many of which are contained in Isaiah, and that I include, as you said, not only through the text, but in the appendix, so that I don't miss any of them. And so